Modern, highly complex systems frequently experience sudden cascades of failure, bypassing extensive operational safeguards and massive resource allocations. This rapid structural degradation maps directly to biological collapse. In cellular aging, the physical boundary gives way under accumulated, invisible stress. Historical social structures break apart through identical mechanisms. The tension builds beneath the surface until the ruling architecture can no longer contain the operational reality of its population. Across different centuries and continents, these social ruptures display the exact same mathematical warning signs prior to collapse. The U model, specifically version 18.0, the Reproducibility Edition, is an active research program designed to predict these failure points. It relies on a registry of over 333 falsifiable discovery protocols. Within this framework, systemic stability is a measurable state, the sufficiently prolonged existence of a system at a tolerable cost. The foundation of this model rests on the triadic necessity theorem. It states that no realized stable system can exist without successfully balancing three irreducible pillars. The first pillar is form. This is the system's structural identity and its capacity to endure intact through time. The second pillar is position. This dictates the system's contextual appropriateness and its specific relational location in space. The third pillar is action. This is the system's ability to actually execute operations and sustain itself through acceptable energy expenditure. Evaluating a system using only domain-local heuristics, like tracking revenue in a business or counting parameters in an AI model, leaves observers blind to structural rot in the other two pillars. Pacing quickens slightly. To build a predictive science, these three abstract pillars must be translated into strictly quantifiable, testable variables. This diagram displays the canonical wrapping protocol. Each pillar is assigned a proxy variable, scored on a normalized scale from 0 to 1. Form maps to code, represented as U sub C. In an organization, this measures ethical rules, audit compliance, and structural identity. Position maps to credo, or U sub creer. This measures market positioning, strategic context, and resource allocation. Action maps to rights, or U sub R. This quantifies operational permissions, interaction dynamics, and internal engagement. These three variables are multiplied and cube-rooted to calculate the baseline triad score. High averages hide fatal flaws. We must account for delta, the variance between the highest and lowest pillar scores. Dividing the triad score by this imbalance generates the final stability index. Firm, conclusive. High capability combined with a lack of ethical structure creates mathematical shear stress. Collapse becomes a function of the math. To test this empirically, protocol DP Tier 1 pulls longitudinal data from publicly listed Fortune 500 firms over a rolling multi-year window. Because the formula squares the imbalance in the denominator, even a minor deficit in one pillar exponentially degrades the system's stability. The model searches for the specific point where this degradation becomes terminal. This chart shows the ROC curve for firm survival. It plots true positive rates against false positive rates to pinpoint the exact threshold of maximum predictive accuracy. When we plot actual firm outcomes, the survival data clusters tightly within a mathematical band between 0.58 and 0.66. This predictive peak centers directly on 0.618, the inverse golden ratio. It represents the limit where the cost of maintaining structural balance can no longer sustain the system's operational load. A secondary protocol proves that tracking the volatility of this imbalance, the rate at which delta fluctuates, predicts corporate failure earlier than standard financial burndown metrics. An organization crossing this hard threshold of structural instability faces a predictable collapse, regardless of market sentiment or cash reserves. This same mathematics applies to the defining technology of this decade, agentic AI. Current development operates on the assumption that scaling parameters or extending context windows will eventually solve the instability of autonomous agents. The math indicates otherwise. This graphic displays the agentic trilemma. Without an underlying triadic architecture, an autonomous system can achieve at most 2 of these 3 traits. When an AI agent fails, it is suffering from a credo deficit. It possesses code to process instructions and rights to execute actions, but it lacks position, a grounded awareness of its contextual boundaries. Operating without this contextual pillar forces the agent into infinite execution loops, rapid goal drift, and the total exhaustion of its API resources. Discovery Protocol 1 establishes the quantitative baseline for this failure. If the coherence of an AI's training data drops below the 0.62 threshold, even a 0.001% misinformation rate will compound into massive factual hallucinations. Granting an AI system high autonomy without a triadic governance structure mathematically guarantees failure at scale. A rigorous statistical analysis demands an obvious question. How do we know these organizational proxy variables aren't manipulated after the fact to align with the threshold? The U model utilizes dp.map, a frozen proxy library designed specifically to prevent p-hacking, the practice of testing multiple variables until a statistically significant pattern emerges by chance. The protocol requires dual mapping. Researchers must build 2 entirely independent sets of proxy variables for every single hypothesis tested. The pre-processing hash for both mappings must be locked, timestamped, and committed before any actual outcome data is pulled from the registry. If mapping A confirms the theory, but mapping B fails to replicate it, the prediction is publicly flagged in the validation tracker as mapping fragile. These brutal self-auditing constraints remove theoretical flexibility. The model must operate as a hard, entirely falsifiable science. By defining stability through objective structural constraints, the U model acts as a universal compiler, allowing deeply separated scientific disciplines to process the same language. This diagram shows how the triad translates physical reality into invariant costs to change across these different fields. Inertia translates to R sub p. This represents the energy cost required to change a system's position within a network. Material density and behavioral rules map to rho sub d. This is the density of form, dictating the system's resistance to structural change. Thermodynamics and systemic inefficiency become Z sub A. This is the dissipation tax applied to every internal action. In biology, cellular aging tracks this exact triad. DNA damage degrades the form, membrane dysfunction destroys the position, and metabolic decline restricts the action. Whether observing the cyclic wear laws of industrial materials or the sudden phase transitions of sovereign debt crises, the underlying engine of reality operates on these identical parameters. Appendix FH extends this research program into long-term hypotheses, mapping the triadic structure against the mechanics of quantum entanglement and metric engineering. But the immediate validity of the theory relies entirely on the DP Tier 1 pre-registration cut point of 0.58 to 0.66. The protocol presents a formal ultimatum. If out-of-sample datasets consistently fall outside this strict mathematical band, the core assumption of the theory is false. Furthermore, if standard financial metrics consistently outperform delta volatility in predicting systemic failure, the theory is officially dead. Robust scientific theories provide the exact mathematical coordinates required to dismantle them. This research program invites the world